This episode of Lobbing Scorchers is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based seller. Not only are they a local company, but they've been supporting independent Seattle soccer media since 2011 and are run by Sounders fans. They offer the best boutique wines in the world to members of their mailing list with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Their model is simple. 1, they email compelling offers. 2, you request bottles that sound appealing. 3, your wine arrives at their Soto warehouse and is ready for pickup or shipping. Their Soto tasting room is also open to the public. If you're interested in joining their mailing list or learning more about them, visit fullpullwines.com. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 53 of Lobbing Scorchers. This is Ari Lillianwall. I've got producer Noah here with me. And Noah, the streak of dub pods has come to an end, and not just an end, but an emphatic end. How are you feeling?
It was crashing. It was a burning. I couldn't look away at some points, Ari, but, all good things must come to an end. This one hurt, though.
Yeah, that's right, folks. The winning streak is over. The vibes have been tempered as the Seattle Sounders got absolutely demolished by LAFC.
Yeah.
3-0 at Lumen Field last night. The people are upset. Agendas are imperiled. Were the national pundits proven right? Did the Seattle Sounders get exposed? We're going to debate exactly that later in the show during our agenda check. As always, we'll also take your questions. We'll jump around the league, give some thoughts on the other results that took place, do winners and losers for Matchday 28 in MLS. We also had a couple of news items related to the Sounders that we're going to talk about. So another jam-packed show and our first L-Pod in a while. The streak of dub pods that we were on, it was never going to last forever. But like you said, the manner in which this L-Pod came about was troubling, for all the positivity that we had been espousing the last few weeks, and rightfully so. The team has been in very good form. We're unfortunately going to have to clown on them quite a bit, I think.
Yeah.
Because there were several instances that took place in this game that were not just unfortunate, but also they had that comedic value.
Yeah, I felt like we were back to the improvisational comedy troupe in a way.
Exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Before we get into all that, though, I did want to let you know that Lobbing Scorchers is a part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. If you want to get the best independent Seattle soccer coverage, consider supporting us by going to sounderatheart.com/LS. That's sounderatheart.com/LS. Scroll down to subscribe and support to get 30 days completely free. Every sign up through our link helps support and grow this show. As always, we'd really like to thank all of our paid subscribers, and I'm going to go back to reading off all their names this week, Noah.
Heck yeah.
Because that's how much we love and appreciate every single person who subscribed and supports us. Kenneth Wade, Joey Pasquinelli, David McCoy, Owen Mason, Dan Pavato, Samuel Fout, Ian Mitchell, Christopher Smith, Norm Bontier, Thomas Martin, Greg Hoker, Chris Maley, Andy Hill, Mike Lentini, Nate Bontier, David Rodriguez, and my nephews, CJ and Miles Marinakis. Thank you all so much. Can't emphasize enough how much we appreciate all that support. And folks, I just need one thing from 2 of you listening to this show. We're at 18 subs right now. We have a new goal that we're setting of 20. So all I need is just 2 of you out there listening to go to sounderatheart.com/LS, subscribe and support the show. And Noah, anything to add there?
Yeah, there's going to be some really fun potential upcoming things that subscribers are going to get access to. Not going to leak too much, but I'm just saying it is more than worth the subscription price. sounderatheart.com/LS.
The drive for 20, that should be attainable. Like I said, just 2 people out there and we will hit that goal. Speaking of that, if you're listening to this and you haven't done so yet, also please subscribe to the Lobbing Scorchers YouTube. The drive for 300 subscribers on there is alive and well. Noah, I just looked at it. We're up to 284
or
thereabouts.
There.
So we're kind of cooking on there. So let's get to 20 subscribers and then 300 on the YouTube. How about that? Let's see if we can do that before the next show. All right, enough of that. Let's get into this LAFC game review because this was a big game. We talked about it on the last show, but going into this game, this was Seattle's chance to make a point, make a statement. National pundits, the analysts, the experts, and the prognosticators, they had coordinated their talking point on this. For the most part, they were not giving the Sounders' recent good run of form much attention at all. But even when they did, it was mostly to say, to downplay it, to discount it, to say that none of these results had come against any good teams that were notable or really worth acknowledging. And, with a win here in this game, or at least a competitive, dignified performance, even if they didn't win, if they drew or they lost but played LAFC straight up and it was a super competitive game, that still could have spoken to a claim that Seattle was at least in the realm of the upper tier clubs in this league, among the clubs that are going to be contenders this year. And instead, they got absolutely blown out on their home field, saw the winning streak come to a crashing halt, got bammed on twice by Denis Bouanga, which I think we kind of all knew was coming. Bouanga was doing backflips on the Lumen Field turf. It was an all-out disaster. So we're going to break down the fine points of that. But before we do that, Noah, let's do our lineup reaction as we always do before the game reviews, because I think there's a lot to talk about with this lineup. I have quite a bit to say, so let's riff on that real quick before we get into the recap. So Paul Rothrock was on the bench for this game. Pedro de la Vega and RBW were both starting, flanking Albert Rusnak. And I think that's where we should start, because I think it's worth discussing. Was that the right call, or did it mess too much with the continuity that Seattle has had going over this recent run of form? I think health and continuity had been actually not as much talked about factors for why this turnaround of recent weeks had happened, but I think that had something to do with that. And starting De La Vega and RBW in this game, I think you could argue that it sort of messed up that rhythm a little bit. Now, I can understand the logic, particularly with starting De La Vega. I can see why this seemed like a good opportunity to kind of unveil him. He's healthier now. He's going to need to be a centerpiece of this team for this team to actually ascend into that tier of contenders, as they are hoping to do. So with him healthier now, theoretically able to play a bit larger complement of minutes than he has been playing, I can see the logic, but in practice, I don't think it worked. I think it looked like he just doesn't have chemistry with his teammates yet. It looked out of rhythm. It looked a little disjointed. The offense never really got going, in part because Seattle was playing from behind for most of the game. But I think, and we obviously have the benefit of hindsight with this because we saw how the game played out, but just looking at how it worked out, I would not have started De La Vega in this game. I would have brought him off the bench like they had been doing. However, whatever you had to do to make that happen, I think starting Paul Rothrock, maybe moving Christian back to right mid, and then starting Alex at right back. Like I said, I understand we have the benefit of hindsight, but I think that's how I would have done it. What do you think?
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing, Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I was quite surprised seeing Pedro de la Vega start. It felt like a little bit of a guess in a sense, and I really don't think that guessing against the toughest opponent in the Western Conference is your best bet. I felt like the biggest issue with Pedro was his positioning. I think he is so talented at just roaming the field and making himself useful, but that comes at the cost of what has been built, that structural Rusnak and Morris 1-2 punch that we talked about. It felt like Albert and Jordan's connection was invisible.
Yeah.
I barely saw Jordan touch the ball all game, and really the only time when he had meaningful contributions was once De La Vega came off. I was surprised to not see Paul Rothrock. I was surprised. I mean, even though we talked about that Nuhu probably should start, I was surprised that Nuhu started and that RBW was on the wing instead of in his position. But
yes, okay, let's talk about that. Starting RBW on the wing, I know, like we've talked about how we're intrigued by the notion of him playing there. Starting him there against LAFC, especially when most of the run he's gotten this year has been as a fullback, it feels like that's a pretty big ask to ask him to be carrying as much of the attacking load, as he would need to, given the start in this scenario. I think those two things are the things worth scrutinizing with the lineup selection. And it just, we saw how the game went. It did not work at all. It didn't work at all. And I don't know how much of that is because of personnel and how much of that was the dumb goals that were conceded that put the whole team behind the 8-ball and the offense. They look shell-shocked after that. We'll talk about that. But the offense just never really got going in this game until the very end of the second half when it was effectively out of reach anyway.
Yeah.
So
I was surprised. Yeah. I know that Chu has not been in good form, and I understand that he's probably fallen out of favor with Brian, but I was surprised that he didn't even feature in this game.
Yeah. Like, I think it would have been a logical opportunity to maybe keep running him. I don't know. But De La Vega, RBW, flanking Rusnak did not work in this game.
It seemed like they were trying to do too much all at once. That was my lineup reaction.
LAFC got the first goal of this game just after the 10-minute mark. So they did what you need to do on the road, weather the storm early. They scored within the first 15 minutes of the game. But let's talk about this sequence because this was one of the crazier sequences that I've seen all year. And there's a lot of discourse flying around about it. This was as hot of press box discourse as I can remember. We were all trying to break down this play and giving our takes on it. But it was a lot happened in this sequence of events. Okay, so the whole thing started because the right side of tell me if I'm misremembering, but I watched the highlights again this morning. Whole thing started because it looked to me like the right side of the defense got unbalanced, and here, I think you saw the relative inexperience that Christian has at right back. I think when that ball went out wide, they had basically they had an overload right there, but he took the wrong angle in trying to cut the attacker off, and then the guy was able to get by him and get a dangerous cross in, which JP then, he tried to stick his foot out, get a foot to the cross and get it out of there. He ended up hitting it back towards the goal, and at that point, the whole situation devolved into all-out chaos. Stefan Fry goes to the ground. Seattle's defenders are scrambling and flailing. It was anarchy in there. Nuhu sees all this going on, and he had a few options for what to do there. The one he selected, he decided the best course of action was he essentially belly flopped on top of the ball. I think the logic, to whatever extent he was applying it in this situation, being if I belly flop on top of the ball and essentially try to start a dog pile in front of goal, think about it. No one's going to be able to kick it into the goal if I'm on top of it. So he made that calculation or something to that effect in his mind. I don't think he really was thinking it through to that degree. I think he was in a desperate situation and made a desperate choice. And, a desperate man sometimes makes rash and impulsive decisions. That's what Nuhu did here. He jumped on top of the ball. And unfortunately, in the process of jumping on top of the ball, he hit it with his hand. It gets correctly called a handball in the box and gives LAFC a penalty kick, which Bouanga converted. Now, I know that everyone is going to pile on Nuhu for this play, and I understand that. I don't know what he was thinking there. Like, out of all the options that he could have picked, that was one of the thing is he didn't need to do it. No. Fry was there.
Yeah.
Like, if he just did not jump on top of the ball and hit it with his hand, Fry covers that, and it's not a goal you play on, it's 0-0. So that's the frustrating thing about it. But I do think, and I know I've become like the new who apologist, even though I don't really think that's what I consider myself. I just kind of try and look at both sides of the whole new who debate, and I see the value in what he brings, but we're not going to get into that whole discussion. But like just a sequence like that is about what leads up to the final result as much as it is about like the final result, if that makes sense. I thought Christian, Ymar, and JP all held culpability on the sequence that put Nuhu in that situation, that put the whole team in that situation in the first place. And just generally speaking, when you are letting the road team take the game to you and create a dangerous opportunity like that, let them get out in transition, let them create that overload that unbalances your defense and lets them put in a cross that your own guy kicks towards your own goal. You are playing with fire fundamentally before you even get to what the last defender does to concede the penalty. Okay. So the game management at that point in the game was not what it needed to be to prevent a chance like that from happening in the first place. And I count 4 guys that could have handled that situation differently to prevent that to begin with. Because what you never want is a mad scramble like that in front of your own goal where their guy is right there trying to like kick it in. And then you suddenly, you have your left back belly flopping on top of the ball. That whole situation needs to be prevented before you even get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, listen, okay? I got to say, I'm kind of in a little bit of disagreement with you.
Oh, yeah.
I think Nuhu is fully at fault there. He is a veteran leader on this defense. He needs to make better decisions. That is silly. That is stupid. I had the perfect angle for it. I guess if you're looking at the front of the goal, I was on the right-hand side, right behind the net on the corner. So I could see it all happening right there. Perfect angle. Fry, it was a sketchy moment for him, and I understand Nuhu wanting to intervene, but you have to have a little bit more trust in your goalkeeper and your other defenders and not put yourself in a silly situation, because I really think that entire sequence changed the game.
Yeah.
I don't think that we were playing particularly well in the first 10 minutes, but I think that a moment like that, where if you're able to weather a moment like that, you can kind of turn that into a little bit more momentum going the other way. And it frustrates me because that is the continuous, silly, stupid mistakes that Nuhu keeps making that make him, I'm sorry, not as good as RBW or another player in that position. Those are the mistakes that matter. That mistake, it negates every other defensive thing that he does in my book, because that goal doesn't happen if Nuhu doesn't literally swan dive onto the ball. That was so dumb.
I'm certainly not defending the swan dive, so hopefully my take does not get interpreted as such. But I do think when you blame a sequence like that all on one guy, you're overlooking a broader issue which led to it.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm pointing out. But as far as the individual decision that Nuhu made in that moment, I mean, it was insane.
It was stupid.
Insane.
It was dumb. Yeah.
It's one of the I don't know if I've ever seen a sequence exactly like that. I mean, I've seen a deflection towards your own goal and a mad scramble in the box. That's not out of the ordinary. I've never seen a defender swan dive on top of the ball and then get called for a handball in the process. This team has conceded a lot of bad goals this year, and they conceded another one just a few minutes after this one. But this was just crazy. And it puts you behind the 8 ball immediately off rip in playing against a team where you can't afford to do that. So anyway, I certainly you will never hear me try to rationalize the decision making for Nuhu right there. But I do think the whole defense kind of let LAFC cook them leading up to that.
And I will say, JP did not cover himself in glory in any means across this entire game. But I think that that ball that he played in, I think that that's a little bit more of a mistake that's forgivable than a choice that you make to intervene in a play that you don't need to, that causes the end result to be a penalty.
So LAFC's up 1-0 within the first 15 minutes of the game. They get their second goal to go up 2-0 in the 26th minute. This time it was a set piece. The service comes into the box. And this was a goalkeeping error, the way I see it. Stefan Frei did not need to come off his line right there. Seattle, I believe it was Jackson Reagan made the clearance, and he couldn't get it further than Bogus. Bogus takes it at the top of the box, but because Frei came off his line to try and punch it, they didn't have anyone in the goal. I think Christian got back there to try and cover it and clear it off the line. But honestly, that was I got to give it to Bogus there. That was a really good finish.
Yeah.
He took that volley perfectly. Not only did he get it on target, but he managed to place it either by luck or just really good skill. He managed to place it by Christian, who was trying to clear it off the line, just like inch perfect with his shot on that. But if Frei stays back, he can he at least has a chance at saving it, right? You don't know what his positioning is going to be, but he gave himself no chance to save it by coming off his line when he didn't need to. Like, you got to trust your 6'6" CB to get to that ball right there. And if Jackson Reagan, if he lets Jackson Reagan clear it, stays on his line, and the exact same thing happens with the ball falling to Bogus, it's way, way less likely that there's going to be a goal scored right there. So just like another self-inflicted error that didn't need to happen. Like, two of the dumber goals that they've conceded all season within a half-hour span, first half hour of the game against the best team in the West. You're never going to win a game like this if you have probably one concession like that, let alone two in the first half hour. The game's pretty much chalked right there. Right there, within the first 30 minutes, you have put yourself so far behind the 8 ball that your chances of winning are pretty much zero. It was 2-0 at halftime, and that's when De La Vega was subbed off. I'm not really sure what the plan was with him, like if he was initially supposed to go more like 50 or 60, or, we were talking about how it might have come down to them tracking his output and figuring that he had already exerted enough to where if they kept him on too deep or at all into the second half, his risk of re-injuring his hamstring could have been higher. But either way, he subbed off for Rothrock at halftime. And I just thought it was funny. I was sitting in the press box. I'm looking at what's going on the field at halftime. I see Rothrock warming up, and it's just like, it's pretty funny that we've reached a point where that's like the secret weapon. The game's not going well. We're losing. What do? We deploy him. We get him out there. Put 14 in there. This whole game is going to change. That's what I was hoping. I was like, okay, all right. Now it's on now.
2-0.
It's on now.
Scariest lead in football.
2-0 now. And well, in all seriousness, like, your percentage chances of winning go way down with those concessions. Like, that's true. But, if you come out firing in the second half and you just get the one goal, like, a result, maybe a 2-2 becomes possible. It's not impossible. Mm-hmm. And, especially when you've got the secret weapon of Paul Rothrock in there.
And it felt like that. Like, once the second half kicked off, they felt like they were on the front foot.
For the first especially, I thought, 10 minutes.
Yep.
Paul Rothrock was bringing the energy. It felt like Seattle's offense in this game didn't really generate very good, meaningful chances, but I thought the sequences of play, like, they felt and looked dangerous. Like, it wasn't as teeth-pullingly bad as it was like earlier in the season, but it just never really manifested in like really truly clean looks. And then LAFC, before Seattle could bring one back, LAFC got their third in the 74th minute. 54-year-old Kai Kamara, who's still playing in MLS for LAFC, he threads Bouanga through, and Bouanga did what he does. He is an evil, demonic, goal-scoring force of nature spawned from the depths of hell, and he did basically what he does to every team in the league. When he gets out and running like that, it's over. Like,
I saw him wide open on the flank, and I was like, I had to turn around.
Chalk. And he actually had another chance like that later in the game, and Frei stuffed him.
That was a nice stop.
Yeah, like that's like 1 out of 100 times he gets in that situation that you're able to like. Yeah. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But Seattle's pushing really hard to try and get a goal at that point. And when you get caught out like that, you have a player like Bouanga, who's the best player in the league in transition. I mean, that's why those concessions, that's part of why they're so debilitating, is that you're going to have to kind of leave yourself exposed like that as you try to chase that goal that gets you back in the game. And then in this situation, that allowed Bouanga to get that look, and he's just not going to miss that all that often. I wanted to talk about this Paul Rothrock penalty shout. This was a big topic of discourse, and I think I see it a little differently than a lot of people do. There's a lot of, slam dunk screenshots going around of the LAFC defender making contact with Paul Rothrock in the box. And it was actually a play where Seattle had 2 penalty shouts back to back. Jordan Morris is making a run into the box. He goes down. But if you watch the replay of the challenge on Jordan, the guy 100% got the ball first. So no PK shout there at all. The one on Rothrock, the ball fell towards Rothrock and he ran onto it. And the defender did make contact with him in the box. But not only did he not get the penalty kick call, he got simmed. The ref gave him a yellow card for simulation, and they looked at it, but no PK. I mean, they look at every close call like that, but like no PK was awarded. People were pissed about it. They thought that should have been a spot kick. And I'll just try and explain this, for my theory of how the ref was calling that, because I mean, you can disagree with it, but I think it does, and he responded to Jeremiah's pool reporter question after the game, and what he said made sense to me, which is that, and I don't know if this is officially in the rules, but if you have a play like that where a defender makes a challenge on an attacker and they make contact, but the referee uses his discretion to deem that the contact was not such that the player had to go down, he wasn't knocked down, then I think they can use their discretion in that situation and be like, look, yeah, he might have technically made a little bit of contact with you, but you could have easily stayed up and instead you dove. So therefore that's simulation and not a penalty. I don't know if that's what the rule technically is, but I always try and look at these things if it happened to Seattle in reverse, would I feel the same way about the call? And I get annoyed when I see penalties get awarded where there's very, very minimal, insignificant contact made, and the guy, that the guy does not have to fall down off it. You see what I'm saying? And I think in this situation, if the guy made contact with Rothrock, he dove. He dove, and I think the simulation was probably fair. So I don't know, like I said, I don't know if there's anything laws of the game wise with that, but I'm talking more in principle. I can see why it got called like that. What do you think?
I mean, it's hard to agree with you because you're right, but I also think that gets called 9 times out of 10. I think that the hard part to understand is while the referee may be correct in his assessment of the situation and even going to the monitor and reviewing it and agreeing with his own discretion. If Bouanga goes down like that in the box, I'm going to be honest, I bet you that referee gives him that penalty. And that's not to say that that's wrong or right. That's just to say that players with more pedigree and status, some of them just know how to flop. I mean, we talked about how Obed learned his dark magic from Nico. I mean, Nico won a ton of those penalties, and I don't know. I still think it probably should. It could go either way. I think that's the tough part about it. It really is a 50-50 where it's the ref's discretion, but I think that's a tough one to get a no call down 3-0.
Yeah. I mean, I do see both sides of it. If you disagree with my analysis of that, feel free to flame me. I definitely think that it could have been called, but when I watch that replay, I really, if I'm honestly looking at it without the rave green glasses on, I cannot really say that contact that was made with Rothrock was such that he needed to go down in the way that he did. I'm not sure about that.
I'll flying kick you in the knee, and then we'll see how you feel about it, and then you can tell me if it's a penalty or not.
Okay, but we're really calling that a flying kick. I mean, I feel like he got tapped.
Well, you know,
I don't know.
I'm defending our boy. Ari.
That's fine. That's fine. And
yeah.
I fully acknowledge with that take that I could be wrong about that. I don't know. I'll look at the replay again. That was just my initial reaction to it. And like, honestly, more than that, just like trying to understand like what the ref was looking at and what he saw. That's my best guess, is that he saw that contact and did not deem it sufficient contact to where Rothrock had to go down for it to be a foul.
And to be fair, he did wave off a penalty shout, kind of the same. Now that I'm remembering it, I can't remember who got fouled in the box for LAFC, but he waved him up on kind of a similar play where the player dove as well. So, you know, I think I do see it how you see it. I agree with you. It's just a tough one to see. And like, Rothrock also tried to go down another time in the box and got waved up. And that one really frustrated me because he had a pretty good look on attack. And I felt like the Sounders, that's like their mentality that they get when their heads get down, their body language gets down. And that hasn't been something that I've seen from Rothrock. So it kind of bothered me a little bit.
So there was a point in this game where it felt like the game plan became like, we're going to like send the ball into the box, and then when it gets cleared out, we're going to put our hands up and try to get a handball. There was that one play, I think it was Aaron Long, that looked like it. That was closer to a penalty for me than the Rothrock play. But like, I don't know, it felt like a little too much like trying to be PK merchants, you know? And then I did think there was a couple sequences outside of that PK shout where our boy Paul was trying to draw fouls, and the ref wasn't giving in to him. And I don't know. It felt like there was like a dynamic there where the ref felt like he was making a meal of the contact, and it happened like 2 or 3 times. So anyway, that was pretty much a wrap from there. Seattle did have a bunch of chances at the very end. Rui Diaz came on, and it's honestly insane that they didn't score at least once. Rui Diaz, he had another one get saved. He's Abering out there right now, getting really.
So did Moose.
Moose had one saved. There was like a couple cleared off the line, and Rothrock almost had a goal, but he got.
That was a nice save.
Yeah,
too.
That was a really good save by Hugo Lloris.
Just so good,
he was like going. He was going
nutty
like
mode.
at the end right there. That's as like in the zone as a goalkeeper can be. He was like having the time of his life out there, just swatting away all those chances. Wouldn't have mattered anyway, though. It would have been the difference between 3-1 and 3-0. But I mean, it is just very unfortunate that Seattle got shut out in this game, especially with all the hype around it. Schmetz was talking it up. We need everyone out here. The team had been playing so well lately. Like I said, chance to make a statement. And then you go out there, not only concede a bunch of dumb goals, but you get shut out yourself. Unfortunate. Seattle takes the L. They fall to 10-8-7 going into this Leagues Cup break, and a definite downturn in vibes. The vibes had been flying high around here with 6 dub pods in a row. The squad making a run in Open Cup, getting back above the playoff line, putting themselves right in the postseason mix. But a loss like this, it brings up a lot of questions and talking points that we had been talking about earlier in the season when this team was struggling. So we're going to get into those right now. Speaking of which, good segue. I'm going to rapid fire these takeaways, and then we're going to debate a couple of topics that I have written down here. I mean, my first takeaway, LAFC owns Seattle right now. I'm sad to report. And, you know, I report that as someone who we recorded a full podcast absolutely reveling in their CONCACAF Champions League final defeat, which I don't regret and would do again. But, like, the reality is, ever since the 2019 Western Conference Championship, which Seattle famously beat LAFC on the road to punch their ticket to MLS Cup, which they ended up winning famously, the greatest result in club history, I think, one of the greatest performances in club history. Pretty much ever since then, this has been pretty one-sided. I think Seattle has maybe beat LAFC like a couple times in that stretch, but pretty much every time Seattle plays LAFC, whether it's in Seattle or, I mean, at BMO when Seattle goes to BMO Stadium at this point, I just don't even I don't even let the possibility into my mind that they're going to get even 1 point. And then when LAFC comes here, it's like I expect them to take a result too, you know, whether it's a draw or a win. So as much as the Timbers owning that rivalry had become a talking point in recent years. This rivalry that we were talking about, this kind of secondary rivalry with LAFC, they have the upper hand on that. I mean, that's just a fact. Something I was thinking about with this game is just the comparison between what their DPs and their difference makers did compared to what Seattle's DPs and difference makers did. Their DPs and their difference makers. Bouanga, 2 goals. Bogus, really good goal. Huge goal in a game-changing moment. Like that's a result game-altering play that Bogus made with that volley. Hugo Lloris, we were just talking about it. Bunch of crazy saves, clean sheet. That's the output and the performances that LAFC got from their DPs and their difference makers. Seattle's DPs, their difference makers. De La Vega, no goals, no assists.
Looked lost.
Albert Rusnak, as well as we've been the biggest purveyors of the Rusnak hype train. We've been dunking on all his haters because of how well he's been playing. He has been the most statistically productive 10 in the league over the last probably 6 to 8 games, maybe even a little longer than that. He'd been blazing hot. One of the hottest players in the league, even if you don't agree that he was the hottest. No goals, no assists in this game. Did not get close to rolling like he had been rolling lately. Jordan Morris, totally off the score sheet, like we were talking about. He just never really got rolling. The 1-2 punch never got rolling. They did not get it. They've been so good about getting him in on those runs behind. Just could not get that going in this game. Rui Diaz, the other DP, still super subbing. Doesn't get a goal coming off the bench. Game was pretty much chalked by the time he came in anyway. But the point is, like when I look at just the pure footy in this game, I really didn't think the level was all that different. The difference was that their difference makers, their DPs, their big money guys, they stepped up and they made those plays in those game-changing moments. And that is I think it just illustrates the kind of gap between where Seattle is at right now and where these elite upper tier clubs are that have these players that they have multiple of these players who can make those plays in those moments, and they do so consistently, and they do it when the lights are bright. And it does not appear that Seattle has that right now. Rusnak and Morris, they had been cooking, but this was a scenario where this is where you need them even more.
Yeah.
And it's not just on them. The entire team didn't come through. But I mean, it's indicative of the gap between this team and the elite teams in this league right now. And LAFC, they have the leading goal scorer in the history of the French national team, one of the best strikers of this generation, coming to their team. They are adding to it.
Yeah.
They're adding to it. It makes me think about the piece that Jeremiah wrote on Sounder at Heart, where he was saying this team can't afford to sit out the upcoming transfer window. And based on how Seattle had been kind of improved, I wasn't sure about that take as much. I thought maybe they could get to a place where a big blockbuster type addition wasn't as necessary. But just looking at these two rosters and the contrast in how their difference makers performed in this game versus Seattle's, it was a stark comparison.
Yeah, I was shocked because I knew that the gap was big, but I didn't think it was this big. This was a real bringing it back to
reality
earth
check.
moment. Yeah.
Reality check.
And, I think another big issue when you have your budget stars working well together, don't tinker with it. I mean, I think that was a big issue here. Morris and Rusnak have been playing well in the system that they are used to, in the specific system that they have been playing the last, 5 weeks. Why would you change that? Why would you change that?
Yeah, I agree. I understand wanting to make this a De La Vega showcase, but just looking at how it turned out, probably shouldn't have done that until he's got more run. It's kind of unrealistic to expect him to slide in there in a game like this and the attack's just going to be humming, everyone's going to gel together just off of training in the few minutes that he has played. I think they should have just kept running with what had been working. Even though it's a much better team than you've played at all, in these recent games, you may as well just kind of try and keep riding that hot hand, right?
Yeah, think about how long it took Rusnak to heat up and get settled in his position.
Yeah.
Same with Morris at the 9. That was weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of chemistry building and mixing and matching people around them to find what works. And it's like that has to be your first choice lineup if that is who is winning the game. And I just felt like they put the cart before the horse on this one. And I understand, the need. It's not even a want to showcase De La Vega. It's the need to make him hit and get minutes because we have to have more players than what we have to compete with the LAFC, but it just was way too early, and that sucks.
Yeah, unfortunate how it all panned out. To add insult to injury here, Brad Smith bammed an absolute golazo for the Houston Dynamo. I saw that highlight, and I was just like, okay, all right, yeah, pile it on. Why don't you? But like in all seriousness, we have talked about this a lot, but I don't think enough. Like for all the Nuhu debate or whatever you think of Nuhu, and like I've been a defender at different junctures. Like this team has really missed the Jovan Jones, Brad Smith style of left back. I really think everyone was touting the Brad Smith trade at the time because they did get a bag for him, and Brad Smith admittedly is not like a super great defensive player. He's a very, very like attack minded fullback, right?
Yeah.
But this team has really missed that element of really good and productive wide defenders who can provide a two-way presence. Alex Roldan at one point was a very consistently effective and productive attacking fullback for this team, but that has not really been the case as much this year. We all know that Nuhu is a pretty much zero in that capacity. All his value is derived from what he brings on defense. And it just felt like this offense could really use that variable, right? And Brad Smith, he really did provide that. Like he was a really good him and Jovan Jones both. They played that position to great effect. They got a lot of assists. Brad Smith, remember he had that run where he was scoring a bunch of goals. So I don't know. It's kind of like an irrelevant tangent, but I saw that goal and it got me thinking about that again because it was just like this team hasn't had that in a while, and I really think like that should be a roster priority, man. Get like a dynamic wide defender like that who can get forward, put in good service, contribute on the stat sheet, like rack up assists, like get the strikers this service. Like neither fullback position is providing that right now, and I think that's one of several factors that have kneecapped this offense at times.
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically for this game, that would have helped so much. I mean, I saw, they let Nuhu make as many runs as possible. If you watch
teams
this game,
have really upped the
they let him do whatever he wants because they understand that he is a non-threat going forward. I mean, honestly, I think he's gotten a little bit better in the past like 10 games, but that like
it's just not his game.
Going from the worst to slightly not the worst is not a big improvement, and yeah, it's not his game, and that's an issue when you have a team that is so hardened defensively like LAFC in the way that they shifted to pack the center of the field. You have to be able to draw some of that pressure out of the center of the field, open up the pitch so that you can play in Albert Rusnak, so that you can play in Jordan Morris, so that you can play in Pedro de la Vega, and like not having to worry about that left back or that right back. That's an issue. That's a problem. That is genuinely like handicapping your team in a way. So I miss him. I miss him so much. Ari, I miss him so much.
It was such a sick goal. Just the angle he hit it from, like, oh my God. All right, let's get into our agenda check this week. I have 4 written down, one of which I believe, or a couple of which we talked about last week. So we're going to do a status update there, and then 2 new ones. And then the last one I've written down, we're going to do a little debate off of that. All right, first one is the Rusnak Morris best 1-2 punch in MLS one that I laid the groundwork for last week. All right, to be fair, I tried to couch it as heavily as I could that like it was more of an agenda like laying the groundwork, and the agenda could take shape in the future if they keep up their current form. You can go back and listen to it. I acknowledged that the sample size was such, it was too small to actually call this like an agenda that had very many legs. But with the way that they had been producing, the numbers that they had been putting up, should they be able to sustain that pace and, maybe put on another very dynamic performance in this game against LAFC, the lofty agenda might have had some legs, but unfortunately, it's diminished in this game. Neither one of them really got rolling. The whole offense never really got rolling till the end. And if anything, there's just going to be more questions about whether that hot streak that they had, how much stock you put in that, and how much was them just kind of beating up on bad teams, which is what we're going to talk about in a second.
Yeah, they got demoralized this game. it wasn't even close. Jordan Morris was invisible until basically the end of the game. Albert got this literally, I screamed in the stadium when this happened. Albert was standing there just like slowly dribbling and got his pocket picked and sprung a counterattack and then just stood there. And I was like screaming. I felt like I was my youth coach back in the day, where it was like you'd get your pocket picked and you just like threw your hands up and walked away. They got demoralized. So I still think that they have the potential to build something around them that can be successful. And the stats are real and they are manifesting in a lot of goals and assists, but like you said, this agenda hinges on them keeping up that streak, and if you play teams like LAFC, apparently that's just not going to happen. So
this agenda took a pretty big hit.
Yeah, it was like barely boiling, and now it's
the Christian at right back agenda, which I had came out in full support of in our last show. I think it got diminished, man. I know you were saying it was all Nuhu's fault. I know everyone's going to say that. And like, trust me, man, I'm really not. I'm not trying to absolve Nuhu from any responsibility on that play. But if that sequence is defended better on the overload, go watch the sequence again and tell me if I'm wrong. Like, the angle that got taken by the right back, Christian in this case there, that's like kind of what started the whole thing. That's what started the whole thing. And it's really like, I don't really even blame Christian for it because he's not played this position that much. But I think we probably got a little caught up in like, okay, you can plug this guy in anywhere and he's going to excel and he's going to play it at a high level. And I do think that's true to an extent. But I think here you kind of saw what happens when you're playing a player out of position, a position that he hasn't played that much. And that was in part what they paid for on that sequence. Like, I think, and it wasn't just him, it wasn't just Ymar, it wasn't just JP, it wasn't just Nuhu. I think that whole group that I just named bear certain degrees of culpability on the sequence, and Nuhu does bear the brunt of the blame for the swan dive. But I do think I want to acknowledge that this agenda is slightly diminished, even if I still think that it's probably the best way to get him on the field. And I have faith in his ability to learn the position and adapt and not kind of have individual errors like that. But like after that sequence, I think it is diminished slightly. I don't know, what do you think?
I think that was the one defensive action that he really messed up on. And I really think that the rest of the game, I don't think that he performed poorly in accordance with the rest of the players on the field. I don't think he holds a flame to how well that Ymar played. I think he probably, if I was going to pick a man of the match, I'd pick Ymar. Maybe I'm wrong, but that would be my pick. But Rodon he won 8 duels. He went 7 for 9 on ground duels, and he didn't do well on aerial duels, but 1 for 3. 8 recoveries, 6 defensive actions, and he was only dribbled past once, which was like that play. I still think that he is pretty damn good at that position, and while the whole team itself didn't cover itself in glory, I don't think he was the reason that they lost this game in any means. And so
no.
I would say maybe slightly diminished, but I still think it's a pretty strong agenda.
Yeah, I think that exactly. That's a good way of putting it. The Pedro de la Vega is the savior for the offense agenda. Let's talk about this one. This is one that we've talked about this sentiment a lot, but not in terms of an actual agenda. And I think, it is one. And I have it marked down as diminished but not dead. And these are subject to change. Like if he starts balling out and racking up huge numbers and the offense looks like super dynamic with him as one of the centerpieces, like this agenda could always skyrocket. It did not feel like he was on the same page as everyone else in attack really at all. It did not look especially close to me. He had one, like early on in the game, he was doing some fun stuff and he had the one shot from distance that didn't miss by like all that much, where I was like, whoa, okay, that was kind of sick. But just in terms of the chemistry and the cohesion with everyone else in attack, the way that he functioned with Rusnak and Morris, it did not come off in this game. And I think it kind of underscored a reality that this is going to be more of a process than we would all probably like to get him acclimated and to get him on the same page with everyone else in the attack, because they did not look like they were on the same page to me in this game at all. And that's sort of, I think, where our questions about the lineup selection come in, because of just how disjointed that it looked for most of the time that he was on the field.
Yeah, I feel like they did a disservice by starting him in this match. I understand that like you also want to show him that you have full confidence in him to build it back. So it's like a catch-22 in a way, right? Like you need to build his confidence back and show him that he is still that number 10 on the back of his shirt that you gave him. Like he is a centerpiece to this team, but also understanding that like he's not ready to go and play. If he can't play 90 minutes, he probably shouldn't be starting against LAFC.
Or at least like 60.
Yeah, it's like he may have been able to go 60. And I do want to like say he was working hard. I don't think that what he was doing was effective necessarily, but I don't think he was not working or not trying or not like giving it 100%. Like I really do. I mean, he fought hard when he was on the ball. I just think that his movement and generally his positioning was more of a detriment than it was a positive to the offense. I don't think that's necessarily fully his fault. I just don't think that he's ready to be fully integrated into this offense, but you have to get him minutes. So it's like, again, it's a catch-22. It sucks, but he's not just this drop him in and he's going to save the entire offense.
Exactly.
And that's unfortunate.
And that's unfortunate because, I don't know, that's kind of what I was hoping he would be. Even though I knew that was not necessarily the likeliest outcome, it was an outcome that felt possible, and it just doesn't appear to be the case when you take into account the injuries and just like the fact that he hasn't played with these guys that much yet.
But I'm happy to be patient. I mean, genuinely, you can see what his potential is. It just sucks. Like, I mean, I'm not good at being patient.
We're gonna keep tabs on this agenda, and like I think what I'm gonna start doing with De La Vega is we're gonna do like minute benchmarks where we check in. Let's see like when he hits 500 minutes, what's it looking like? Where we at? When he hits 1,000 minutes, what's it like? Where we at? And as the sample size gets bigger and bigger, I think we're gonna start to be able to formulate a true idea, like more conclusions as to what type of impact he can make and is ultimately gonna make. But the larger that sample size gets, the more pressure is going to be on this for him. Like he needs to be producing for this team to get anywhere close to being able to reach the goals that they have. So we're definitely going to keep tracking it. All right, last agenda, and then we're gonna spend a little bit of time on this one. We're going to debate it. I called this one it's the Bradley Wright Phillips honorary Seattle Sounders are fraudulent agenda. Okay, Bradley Wright Phillips, he was one of the foremost national pundits that I saw on MLS Season Pass, who before this game and in the last couple of weeks, he said multiple times when the Sounders were brought up that, I'm not sold on anything they're doing yet. They've been really inconsistent all season. And then even when they started winning games, he was saying, they're based there. It's fraudulent. They're beating up on they're capitalizing on a soft part of their schedule. Look at the teams that they've played. Look at the teams that they've beat. This doesn't really mean all that much. Like, talk to me when you beat like some real competition. Okay. And, we addressed that his take with his status as part of the national pundit class. And, I acknowledged that he had fair point there, but I also pointed out that, like, you know, you can only play who's in front of you, and that good teams take care of business against inferior competition. So I wasn't knocking Seattle for that as much as he was. But in terms of this agenda, I mean, it's strengthened, okay? Like, there's no doubt about it that it's strengthened, because not only did you have a scenario where you were playing against one of the best teams in the league and you could prove that this agenda was false, but like you got boat raced. Like, it looked like they were in a completely different class than you on your home field. So I hate to say it, but like, we might have to apologize to BWP. He might have actually cooked on that.
Yeah.
And that's further reinforced by the fact that AP, I believe, tweeted out the stat, but Seattle is now 0-5-5, 0 wins, 5 losses, 5 draws against like the upper tier opponents. I forget exactly how it was measured. It might have been like top 3 or top 4, but basically against the good teams, they're 0-5-5. I just learned that last night. That's worse than I thought. And that, frankly, pretty much proves this agenda until proven otherwise. Like, I don't know how else to interpret that stat. Which, like I said, like, I was not aware that the splits were that drastic. I figured that they were pretty drastic, but until this team proves that agenda wrong, BWP might have been right.
Yeah, you know, I owe you an apology, BWP. I really wasn't familiar with your game. You know, the W in Bradley Wright Phillips does actually stand for right, apparently. But man, it's always hard to accept a fraud watch claim against a club that we cover.
It doesn't feel so good to be on this side of it.
Yeah, we you know, BWP coming out with a Seattle Sounders fraud watch claim was tough. But I hate to say it, he cooked.
He cooked.
And you know, we cannot shy away from these allegations now. The Sounders, they've got some proving to do, and I think that he was correct and I was incredibly wrong. But I think in our defense, we both couched it saying this game will define the Sounders more than the last 6 had.
Yeah, and like I said earlier at the top of the show, like, it's one thing to lose this game, but to like not really compete, to shoot yourself in the foot multiple times within the first half hour, get played off your home field. Like I said, Bouanga's backflipping on your turf. They're basically clowning on you. It was the manner of the result as much as the result itself, you know? And with that record in mind, combined with how this game went, the Seattle Sounders are on fraud watch, and basically they are fraudulent until proven otherwise. That's kind of how I see it right now. And you know, that's not being reactionary off one result. That's really just what I think a stat like that record against the top teams indicates, especially when you look at your hottest run of form and it was all against teams that are below the playoff line. You know, it's just have to call it how we see it.
Yeah. And I don't think that that's saying that the Sounders are bad. I just don't think that that's saying that the Sounders are top tier or that they're elite or that they're good, not great. That's,
yeah, it's
as Penn State's James Franklin would say, they are good, not great.
Yeah, it's not about like good or bad. It's more about the gap between them and the true contenders. And I had an idea for a thought exercise, actually, that I was thinking about dishing for this episode, but didn't end up doing it. But I think maybe we'll do it on the next one. But I was gonna make tiers, right?
Yeah.
And like, you know, have them go from elite, like trophy shield contender, to good, competitive, but not great, all the way down to like mid to actively bad, to you should probably disband your club.
Yeah, relegated.
And so I think I'll go through and do that at some point. But like the point of that would be to sort of like peg where Seattle is, like assess the gap between them and the elite trophy contenders, and maybe like talk a little bit about what it'll take to get back there, because that's what this team is, you know, used to being. And I think it's become increasingly clear that that's not where they are right now. All right, let's dive into questions, Noah. Thank you to everyone, as always, who submitted. We really appreciate you getting the discourse flowing. Sorry that we can't get to every single one. My tweet got like 50 plus responses this week, but we're going to hit a few right here, and always appreciate everyone blowing up my mentions with your takes. All right, Noah, what do we got?
Friends, thank you all for the responses. We're going to start out here with a tweet that blew up, honestly. Nat Lang asks, how bad of a look is it for Nuhu that an 18-year-old RBW had a cooler head on his shoulders in a big game and had to rein in Nuhu on the field? We got an immature Nuhu when we needed a veteran presence the most, and it's just with the picture of RBW pointing to his forehead while Nuhu is flaming out.
That picture is hilarious. It's iconic. It's my cover photo right now. It's like
You changed the Kevin.
I did, yeah. I mean, I know I'm going to take heat for that, but it had literally been like over a decade.
Yeah.
So, and that the Parsimane screenshot, it had a good run. But I saw that picture, and it just really sized everything up. I thought, like you said, like RBW being the one to go up to Nuhu and be like, bro, like what are you thinking? Like he's saying, like, use your head, right? That's like what he's getting at right there. So honestly, I look at that photo as probably the only positive to come out of this game, because it is hilarious. Like when you factor in like the pose he's doing and the players involved, like amazing photo or screenshot, whatever it is.
Connor Close asks, agenda check. Can Rusnak play as effective 10 against a top-tier team in MLS? I may be wrong, but it feels like his assists recently are coming entirely from transition moments and set pieces. In and around the box tonight, it felt like he was a liability for chance creation.
Yeah, I mean, this was definitely one of his less effective games of the season, especially considering the circumstances and how hot he had been lately. I guess we'll have to see in the games throughout the rest of the season how much he's able to bring that previous level that he'd shown the last few weeks against upper tier competition. You know, I've talked about this a lot, but I mean, I've been watching this guy play in MLS for years, and I never thought of him during his Real Salt Lake days as necessarily a guy who brought it more or less based on who they were playing. Like, I still think he's a really good, arguably DP caliber player that we're still kind of getting a feel on what's going to happen with that. But he's got 11 assists this year, and a lot of them are primary assists, transition moments, and set pieces. I mean, that's where he should be getting, I think, most of his assists. I mean, I see what you're saying about around the box, the whole team, and like the attackers in particular not being clinical enough, not being effective enough. But I guess overall, that question is it's a very valid question, and it's something that we're going to get to see answered down the stretch run of the season. And it could be determinative towards like whether he is brought back as a DP and a centerpiece on this roster again. Because for as much praise as we rightfully have heaped on him, it is just one run of form, and it does need to be sustained and built upon, repeated, to like truly be considered what he is as a player on this team, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that the way that LAFC were playing defensively, I mean, they were looking for the counterattack basically the entire game. Two counterattacking teams playing each other, or a team that has been playing very well on the counter like the Sounders have, but have also been well in possession. That's kind of hard. That takes away half of their game, right? Like, it was a tough scene. I also think they did well to defend Rusnak. Like, I think you do have to give it to LAFC a little bit. They are a talented defensive team, and they played a really good scheme against the Sounders.
They had a good game plan. Like, I think Steve C kind of cooked. We clown on Steve C a little bit, and I was saying that how bad they got boat raced by the Crew a couple weeks ago, maybe poured some cold water on his USMNT candidacy. But I think that's a good point. Like, their game plan coming in as the road team, and sort of how their tactics and how they matched up with Seattle, and then also how they executed it, was lights out. And I think you do have to credit Stevie C for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, like, I'm not to like keep beating on the point, and I'm not a master tactician by any means, but they packed the middle of the field, and they were so heavy transitionally on defense that it made it almost impossible for Morris to get the ball. It was this okay, look for a pass. I mean, the amount of times the ball was going back and forth in the inside of the 18-yard box and there just wasn't a clear shot. I mean, that's a tough defensive task, and I really do think that LA did a great job to like basically hold them scoreless. And you really only saw them kind of fumble and fold towards the end of the game. Skilla Joe asks, Raul at the 9 agenda, start it up. He has looked way more dangerous against a team who doesn't press. Does he start in the Open Cup? ?
It's kind of tough to gauge right now because I agree he has looked more dangerous coming like in his substitute appearances recently, and like part of that is because he's actually getting looks closer to goal, like from inside the box. But he's snake bit. He's
not scoring.
He's not scoring, but like. A couple of these shots that he's hit, like you really like. I know it only matters if it goes in, but there's been at least 2 of these that I can think of off the top of my head where you cannot hit it like all that much better. He's just gotten. Sometimes the goalkeeper just gets you, and it seems like just kind of nothing's falling his way right now. It's the Hebert effect. The ghost of Hebert is alive and well on this team. It afflicts whoever the backup 9 is, whether it's Moose, whether it's Raul. It might just be a curse. I don't know. But either way, like it's kind of a weird balance between being encouraged by the improvement in the runs he's making and the positions he's getting in with the fact that he hasn't been finishing. He hasn't scored a goal in any of these appearances, even though he has gotten really close. I mean, the one that Loris saved on him last night, it's just like, I mean, I feel bad for him. Like he hit that perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, he just played the 2 best goalkeepers. Well, depending, but 2 of the best goalkeepers in the league against Loris and Berkey. So it's like there's not much better you can do, and Martin Poss as well. We played. I'm gonna be honest. He shouldn't start. There's no way. No. Like he has been doing very well in his super sub role, and I think that that's a great role for him. I'm happy that he's getting looks. One of them will convert eventually, probably, maybe, unless the Hebert curse is alive and well. And at that point, it's time to sage the locker room, folks. It's time to do an exorcism because Hebert's actually doing well in China. So it's, I don't know what's going on. But Sounda Boy asks, 3-0 at home is always depressing, but I'm more afraid of further evidence that this team cannot consistently compete with top dogs. A lot of good players, but need more great players. Hopeful for PDLV and maybe dude, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Ari, can you help me? Yeah, Speakic. But I fear that it's not enough at this level.
Yeah, I mean, we hit on that a little bit already, but it's a very fair question and it's a very fair concern. Like, there's so much of it hinges on De La Vega, right? And like, I think there really was a lot to be encouraged by how they have been playing offensively the last few weeks, whatever you think of the competition. Anytime you have your number 9 and your number 10 playing with that much cohesion and chemistry and execution and confidence, and the finishing looks that good, that is a good start, and it's a lot to build on. But I mean, like I was saying, man, like in this game, it got really underscored how you have one team who has DPs and difference makers who step up and produce in those moments, and you have the other team where they didn't in this game, and frankly, like, haven't been enough in these scenarios this year. So I think like the situation is that this is going to be the narrative that hovers around them until they prove it wrong. That's like, there's nothing that we can say that's going to like change anything. The only thing that's going to change that concern and that talking point is if they have a couple more of these big games against better opponents and they play up to the moment and they win a couple of these games. That's how you dispel this. Until then, it's going to keep getting talked about, especially based on how that game went.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that could maybe win the U.S. Open Cup with this roster, but I don't see them winning. I don't see them winning MLS Cup unless they make some signings. I mean, genuinely.
Yeah.
Like, it is not enough with what's on the roster, and we've been talking about that for 2 seasons now. And it is it is an issue if they don't sign anybody at this transfer window, which we're going to get into after questions. But you can't hinge your entire game plan on one signing. That is just irresponsible. You need to be looking towards the future. And I just think that with this aging roster and with what's coming up, especially with the Club World Cup this summer, you have to make some hard and drastic decisions. And I know we just talked about Raul at the 9, but I'll ask you, I guess, like, I think you have to buy him out. I don't think that there is a way in which this team can get any better if you don't buy him out. Even if that comes at the consequence of, putting you in a sketchy financial situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair point. I just think it's kind of a question of like what they should do and what they will do. And I personally, if I had to predict it, I don't think they're going to buy him out. I don't think they want to take that hit. And I think they are in a situation where it seems like they have a ceiling and they're like kneecapped from being able to make the additions they need to like break through and like reach another level. And they're in danger of like kind of staying in purgatory, right?
Yeah, it's pretty tough to watch. I'm not gonna lie, because it just feels like we're chained to something that isn't that we don't have to be, but that's how it's been going. Ending it off here with our final question from Kenneth Wade. Pretty easy to summarize. Good as the Sounders have been, there is still a gulf in high-end talent between them and good teams in the league. It doesn't feel like LAFC even played that well, but Bouanga and Bogus spam their chances. Lloris makes a couple of saves, and that's the game.
Yeah, well put, man. I mean, Bouanga and Bogus, like, they've been look at what they've been doing for LAFC all season. Like, what they did in this game, that's like what they do most games. They had the kind of anomaly where they got cooked on by the Crew, but generally week in and week out, this is a team that gets that elite production from those spots. And like even Loris, like the fact that Loris and Giroud are both going to be on this team, and Giroud's on his way, he's not even here yet, and they're going to get even better. Like,
Bouanga and Giroud. That's insane.
In the short term, that gap is only going to get bigger. What do you think Giroud's going to do in MLS? Like, come on.
Even if he doesn't perform particularly well, if he can win them a couple more games, that's it. It doesn't matter. You're just adding more and more and more top-end talent when the Sounders are adding John Bell, who's great and has been playing well, but like, okay. Dude, Paul Rothrock needs some help, Ari. Paul Rothrock, I posted our podcast, our first ever podcast, which was Paul Rothrock needs some help and the XG debate.
And here we are in episode 53, still talking about how Paul Rothrock should be starting.
Exactly. Thank you all for your questions. We really appreciate it. Keep Bam and Ari in his mentions, and we will get to your question eventually.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who submitted. All right, let's hit these news items real quick before we do winners and losers and then get out of here. That sound good, Noah?
Let's do it.
The first news item that we had written down here is apparently the Spekic transfer completely fell through. Noah, did you have any any more details on that, or what happened?
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and read more about it, you can go to sounderatheart.com.
Which you should subscribe to, sounderatheart.com/LS.
There you go, yep. But basically, the transfer on the team's ends was agreed upon. The transfer fee was fine, but the problem was his salary demands could not fit into what the Sounders were able to pay for the salary cap. So the transfer is off, and there just wasn't enough like wiggle room to meet Spekic's compensation needs. And this has happened before, but it's a tough thing to see and hear and feel, because I haven't heard any other rumors.
It was exciting to have a rumor. I don't know, with the acknowledgement that I know absolutely nothing about this guy other than what I've like read on the surface level and watched a little bit on YouTube. Like, I don't really know if I saw this as like a hugely needle moving addition. It would have been fun, and maybe it could have helped a lot and boosted the level. But I mean, there's just kind of levels to this, man. Like, we're talking about Speakic and LAFC's talking about J. Rue. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you have to necessarily like make a play for an older like legend like a Zlatan or Gareth Bale or like type signing like that. But I mean, just look at some of the names that have come in the league in recent years. Like even just like looking at the Galaxy, for example, like they ended up getting Ricky Puig. That's a pretty big, significant needle moving signing. And then like would Speakic have been on the tier of Joey Paints or Gabriel Peck? Maybe, but I don't know if I saw anything to that effect. I could be wrong about that. Like maybe he is that good, but I guess what I'm saying is like, it feels like this team needs like a big swing, and I don't really know based on what I saw if Speakic was exactly that.
I think he was an upgrade to Chu. I think that's realistically what they were looking at him as. And, then maybe being able to move Leo Chu. I think they should have moved Leo Chu before. I think they should move him this transfer window to open up more space, regardless of what happens. But it seems very clear, and in the Sounder at Heart article, they talk about it, that the Sounders are looking to bolster their wide attacking options. That's something that they want. And I don't think Speakic is going to be your superstar DP signing that, is going to fill up the stadium or anything. But if he's a piece that ends up building you some momentum for a non-DP slot, like that's not a bad idea. But it feels like we're moneyballing, Ari. I don't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Like I don't want to turn into the Philadelphia Union. Like we need to make decisions. You have to buy out Raul. You have to move. You have to move people who are not playing well on this team. You have to open up space if you want to compete. And I just feel like they're not willing to make the tough decision.
It does feel like moneyballing. Let's talk about Leagues Cup real quick because that's getting started. This was the last game before Leagues Cup really kicks off. Seattle's grouped with Minnesota United and Club Necaxa of Liga MX. Neither one of those teams are especially good. Minnesota United has really torpedoed in recent weeks, and Necaxa has they're like 13th on the Liga MX table. So Seattle should be able to hang in that group. And so a lot of people are down on Leagues Cup. They don't care about it. I gave my take on that on the solo pod a couple weeks ago. Like, I admit that I'm a sicko, but I think there is honestly merit and value to getting MLS clubs run against Liga MX competition. I witnessed firsthand how that elevated Seattle's level when they took this tournament really seriously. They got in a ton of reps against Liga MX competition. They made it all the way to the final where they played against a Liga MX team. And I'm telling you guys, I really saw the effect that it had on their level going into Champions League the next year. And I really believe that is part of the reason why they won, because they had gotten so many reps and played in pretty high stakes games, played in a final against Liga MX teams, got a feel for what those games are like, how they needed to execute in those games. And it made them better, and it helped them win Champions League. And just in general for me, like, I like seeing MLS teams play against these teams because I think the level is higher. The games are really competitive. They're usually pretty lively and energetic. They're back and forth. It's like entertaining. And at the end of the day, like when you play better competition, that is how you get better. Like it's as simple as that. So I'm looking forward to it from that standpoint. Even if I get the cynicism around it, like, especially when you take into account the context of like the league trying to like get MLS clubs out of Open Cup and stuff like that, and it feels cynical. It feels like a money grab. I don't know how much more of a money grab it is than anything else in a capitalist society, but that's kind of a deeper conversation for another day. I'm going to be watching the tournament, but that's just me.
Yeah,
I have to watch all of it. So.
Yeah, I mean we're gonna watch it. We'll lay down pods. I enjoyed watching it last year. I enjoyed watching it the year the Sounders made their run to the final. And I think that it is something to be excited about, I also think that it's completely fine to not care about it. And I think that's the beauty of it. I think that it sucks that it's coming at the collateral of the Open Cup. But at the end of the day, can I say something controversial, Ari?
Oh, yeah, dish it.
I actually kind of loved that there were way more USL teams making deeper runs in the Open Cup this year, just simply because there were not as many MLS teams to play. I think that it's also there's like a give and a take to that, right? But it was fun to see. It's fun to see Indy 11 in could potentially be hosting a final.
That would be so sick.
Like, that would be so sick. And like, I don't know if that happens if there's every MLS team in there. I don't know. It sucks, but it also is fun. And I think that if you want to care about it, care about it. If you don't, it doesn't matter. I think the Sounders would probably most likely rather be playing league matches right now, but who cares, man? Go for the trophy, try and win it. If you can win Leagues Cup and Open Cup, I feel like that's a pretty successful season for the Sounders.
If they did manage to win both, that would be huge. Although my confidence level that they have any chance at all at beating LAFC in the Open Cup is pretty diminished.
It's
right
dwindling.
now.
Yeah,
it's dwindled after witnessing what we witnessed last night. We had one more news item here regarding U.S. Open Cup hosting rights. Noah, what's going on with that?
Yeah, so the Sounders have a chance to host as long as they beat LAFC and Sporting Kansas City beats Indy 11. So either if the Sounders go on to beat LA and Indy wins, it will be at Indy 11, which would be so sick to have a final there.
Yeah, that's kind of a win-win, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, you're either hosting or Indy 11 is hosting, which would be incredible.
I'll be there.
For them. I'll be going.
We'll
to that.
go to that one. Yeah,
for sure.
We'll pod live post USSC
at the Indy 11 stadium. Absolutely. Right.
But I mean, big task to beat LAFC at Starfire, which should be an electric game.
It's gonna be like Bouanga on that little ass field. That's gonna be lit,
dude. Listen.
He's gonna bam.
He's gonna bam unless Andy T goes God mode.
God, I'm just so sick of that guy.
I know.
All right, let's hit winners and losers real quick, and then that'll be a wrap for episode 53. Winners for Matchday 28 in MLS. First one, I got the Colorado Rapids. They beat Real Salt Lake, who are kind of reeling low-key without Chicho, 3-2 to win the Rocky Mountain Cup, which is it's like kind of their version of it's their rivalry trophy, like kind of like the Cascadia Cup or the Heritage Cup, which no one really outside of those two teams cares about it. But I will say, I saw a video that the Rapids tweeted of Chris Armas parading that trophy around. Did you see that?
He looked stoked,
He was jacked, and the fans were going fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Like, it really looked like it made me kind of happy for the Rapids fans because they were down bad last year, and a lot of Rapids fans are like low-key way more devoted to that club than a lot of people probably realize.
Yeah.
And so for them to get just like a bit like a pump-up moment like that and then I think it kind of showed to me that Chris Armas he's just sort of vibing. He's
100%.
loving life right now. I think he's kind of relishing the fact that everyone clowned on his hiring and clowned on the Rapids going into the year, predicted that he's probably screenshotted all the predictions that had them in 14th.
They have a board up
and they've been good this year. They like Georgi Mihailovic was a great signing. Zach Steffen, not so much, but like the roster makeover they did, it seemed like it really worked. And I mean, they're fourth. They've been fourth in the West for the last few weeks. They're very much like they're in possession of a top 4 spot right now. Like, things are pretty good in Rapids land, and that's a big dub for them this week. Next one, I got LA Galaxy. Okay, this goes to what's sort of become the theme of this show, but they beat the Timbies 3-2. Ricky Puig, Gabriel Peck, and Joey Paints all scored. I mean, those are there. That's another example of a team that has those DPs, those weapons, those difference makers performing at an elite level, and you see the difference it makes. Their points per game are up there contending for the Shield, and the Galaxy, for whatever flaws they may have in defense, in that attack, man, I'm telling you, it's a buzzsaw, and you saw it again in this game. And then my last winner, I got the Houston Dynamo and Brad Smith. Did you see the highlights of this Vancouver game?
I did, yeah.
This was one of the most insane games of the season, honestly.
It was MLS coded as hell.
Yeah, it was. So what happened was Houston was up 2-0 at Vancouver, conceded 3 times in a row, fell behind 3-2. Brad Smith scored a banger to tie it, and then Houston scored the winner to win 4-3. So just like a crazy back and forth game where the lead swapped a bunch of times. Just really fun and entertaining game. Brad Smith scored a banger, and Benny O and company get a really big dub over a Whitecaps team that, once again, like they're just like perennially one player away type stuff, you know? Like they should, based on how they've built around Ryan Gauld and Brian White, which, God, now that I just say that, I have not mentioned them once in the like when I'm comparing in the 1-2 punches. That could be the best one.
Yeah.
Like, and at least if you're measuring it just in terms of raw output. But it's like outside of that, doesn't seem like they have a lot going on, and they just got bammed on by Brad Smith in Houston. But yeah, big dub for Benny O. All right, losers. Seattle Sounders had a chance to make a statement and flopped. I mean, to get boat raced like that at home against, like in these circumstances against LAFC, that's not good.
No.
Like you could lose the game, honestly. You could take a negative result, but like you needed a better performance than that to kind of show and give confidence both internally and externally that you are up for competition like this, and they just did not do that at all.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything to add. We cooked on that. It's
right,
embarrassing.
FC Cincinnati, they're just in free fall right now. So many injuries. Bammed on 3-1 by the Red Bulls, who the Red Bulls are low key like really good. I was thinking about the tiers and like whether I would put them in elite or just like very good, and I leaned more towards very good, but they're like closer to that upper tier in the East than I think a lot of people probably realize. The pundits don't give them all that much attention. But FC Cincinnati, more to the point, with all the injuries that they have right now, I mean, they're just taking really bad results. They lost to the Chicago Fire. They were not all that competitive against the Red Bulls. Their Shield hopes are definitely on the ropes, and it's not necessarily like their fault in the sense that a lot of it's to do with just you can only withstand so many injuries, so many absences. But I think it's looking like we're going to have a new Shield winner this year, at least as it stands right now. And then Nashville SC bammed on 3-0 for a second game in a row, this time by the Philly Union, who...
Are they back?
They're kind of back. They've won by a combined score of 8-1 the last 2 weeks. Gazdag scored a hat trick in this game. They have Kevin Sullivan like debuting. So the vibes in Philly have turned around a little bit, but it's just crazy how Nashville went from this like ascendant, consistent playoff team built around an MVP winner and perennial candidate in Hani Mukhtar to they're one of the worst teams in the league right now.
Tough.
All right, that's all I had for winners and losers. So I think with that, we can get out of here for episode 53. Thank you all so much, as always, for tuning in. We really appreciate each and every single one of you who listens every single week. Like, comment, subscribe, rate 5 stars,
share
write
with
reviews,
the ghost of A-Bear.
Share with A-Bear. Subscribe to the YouTube. Subscribe to all the social medias. Sub to Sounder at Heart. sounderatheart.com/LS. That'll do it for this one. We'll catch you next time. Until then, we out.
Peace.